A good lens is as vital as a good camera. Getting a cheap lens would be like buying used tires for a sports car. It may look good, but it just won't go anywhere. Here again, we join Struan for some insight into lenses.
So Krista, let's move on from camera bodies to lenses. Now, how important is a lens? Let's start there.
Good glass is what will make your shot. The lens is very important, and especially when you're first starting out and maybe are under a tight budget, what I often will say is spend more on your lens than on your body. That is like a good rule of thumb to have in your head.
So, explain focal length. Sometimes I've explained this to people who are just buying these things and that sort of their eyes glaze over. So let's talk about focal length here.
Yeah, there's a lot of numbers in photography. A good rule of thumb for the distance with your focal length is the lower the number, so like let's say a 8.5 mil fisheye, that's very, very wide angle. So the lower the number, the more you're gonna get in the shot. The higher the number, the closer you're gonna get without actually physically moving. So a sports photographer maybe is using a 600 mil lens. You are far, far away, but you're getting a nice tight shot.
So let's talk through the lenses. We've talked, there's talk about fast lenses, slow lenses, and why is one zoom lens, probably the same zoom, more costly than another? Can we go through that?
Yeah. Okay, so like your average kit lens that would come on an entry-level camera like this, you'll see it has an aperture range of 3.5-5.6. Now that means if I'm shooting in manual without changing any settings, if I'm shooting at 3.5 and I start zooming in, it's gonna just cut that light back. It'll jump to 4.5 to 5.6, and suddenly your exposure is completely off.
So that's a slow lens, as we
That's
call
a
it.
slow lens.
So if we were going to get the same zoom, for instance, what would we spend on something like that as compared to what's a more expensive zoom, and why is it more expensive?
Yeah, so something like this is a 1635. Now this is maybe a touch wider, but it's still like a wide angle to mid-range lens. This is a 2.8 all the way through. You're also getting L glass, which is going to be much, much sharper, but also a very nice bokeh, better contrast, better coatings in the lens.
And how much are you spending on that?
This one, you're going to be looking at just under $2,000.
$2,000. Okay. So there are also long zoom lenses like this, and this is a 70-200, 2.8 again. Now this is about $2,800.
Yep.
Now there's one that looks exactly like it, and it comes one stop slower.
Yeah.
And we're spending?
Well, there's about two different versions. There's a 70-200 f4 with no stabilizer. You could get that for about $900 or so. Then you get the one with a stabilization at f4. That's going to be closer to the 14 mark. This one is 2.8 plus you have a stabilization. You're able to lock your focus at just the far away stuff or your whole range, so being able to pull in and pull out.
And that's why you spend more money.
That's why you're spending more money, yeah. And stabilization is definitely more important when you're getting a longer zoom lens, because any little shake is going to be magnified by 200, so it's very important.
Okay, now we've talked about zoom lenses, and that covers a nice range, anything from a wide angle to zooming in at 200 millimeter. So why would I buy a prime lens, which is a fixed lens? In other words, it just does one focal length, yeah.
Well, this is a 50 mil, which is a great first prime lens to get, especially if you're into portraiture fashion, because there's no distortion on it. But more importantly, a prime lens, there's less compression in it than there is in a zoom lens. So you're going to get a much sharper image, but then also for maybe a little less money than a big zoom, you're going to have a really, really shallow depth of field, so lots of light coming through that lens, which is a very nice look.
So they're all fixed f-stops on them. Yes.
Fixed f-stops, but lots of light coming through.
Give me an idea of a wide angle. So if I needed to shoot what this thing does, I have to literally pick up 3 lenses, right?
Yeah.
So let's start with the super wide angle here. What's this one here?
Well, here I have a fisheye, a 16 mil 2.8. Now this will be really, really great if you're into extreme sports, so your skateboarders, things like that, or getting the whole shot, the whole scene in that shot. But you will pay the price of the sacrifice of that really extreme bubble distortion look.
Right.
which you kind of want sometimes.
Now, there are super wide angles that don't have that distortion, so what are we looking at there? Are we looking at 17 mils or 18 mils?
17 mil, if you're on a full frame. If you're on a crop body, you want maybe like a 10 to 24, 10 to 22, that range.
Okay. So your advice then for someone who's just bought one of these, what's the best recommendation for a lens?
For one lens, I can do...
If I can only afford one lens.
One lens that can do pretty much everything for you. I would go with something like this, the 24 to 70, 2.8. And that, you know, you're really investing in it. It's a pro lens. It's going to last you a long, long time. And you can pretty much walk into any event or shoot people without a lot of distortion with something like that. But you're already going right to the good stuff and getting a pro lens out of the gates.
And also, if the next body comes along next year, I can still keep the lens and...
Absolutely. You can put this on a crop censored body, and then once you're ready to get a full frame body, you're ready to go. You're not reinvesting.
So this is where you should put your money.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good idea.
When you're buying your first lens, it's always good to sort of really look at your budget. Try and spend as much on your lens as possible. It's always better to spend a bit more on your lens than on your camera body. That's your investment that you keep forever if you do it right. You don't want to be paying that newbie tax where you're buying cheap lenses. Eventually you spent as much money if you just bought that pro lens right away. So look for a 2.8 aperture that goes all the way through, and that's always a very good investment. Maybe your first lens you want a zoom lens that's high-end glass just so you get the good stuff right away.